Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome everyone. This is subject number 3673, Ecological Building Design and Materials. I welcome you all. My name is Architect Omer Shujat Bhatti. Um, this is my profile. I'm an architect by profession. I have a bachelor's in architecture in 2011 from Comsets, then MPM from ZEPIS in 2013, PhD in environmental design 14 from AIOU. In 17, I completed my MS in environmental design. In 2018, I completed my MS in project management, and at the moment, I am continuing my PhD in environmental sciences from United Islamic University. And during this session, I'll be optimizing and discussing with you about the topics. At the moment, I'm working as a research associate at the IOU, and I'm a member of visiting faculty at a number of other institutions. About my audience, I will be discussing, inshallah, during the session of this subject. And I'll be moving on towards the details of this subject. Um the subject will primarily focus on the ecological building design and materials and its prospects and aspects related with these 9 units. As you can see, the first will be the ecology of the built structures. Later, we'll be discussing the health house design strategies, resources and materials, energy conservation, energy efficiency, energy from the sun, water conservation and quality, finance, legislation, costs, and in the end, we'll be optimizing for the case studies. So when we talk of a holistic design in the perspective of the build structure, in the perspective of ecology, what is certain is that any useful and meaningful approach must be holistic. Means it should be a broader prospect. It should have a holistic approach towards things. Means a broader canvas, so that you can see all the major components, all the major things, and all these things have to be integrated. Like when we are building something at a site, all the other aspects like the environment, the context of the site, the existing built environment around the neighborhood, the accessibility, the climate, all these things matter. That is to say, it must take as wide as perspective as possible and foster an understanding of the complex. Now, for a building to be green, it is essential for the environmental impacts of all its constituent parts and design elements or decisions to be evaluated. That means whenever we are designing something and we want it to be green, means sustainable हो सके, वो useful हो सके, वो long term चल सके, वो environment को damage ना कर रही हो, वो end users को satisfy कर सकती हो और comfortable हो, it has to be green. And in that perspective, all of its constituent parts and design decisions have to be evaluated. They must be considered. This is such a more thorough exercise than simply adding a few green elements such as grass roof or a solar panel. But even a building with the best green credentials can fail to delight and inspire. So it is very important that in the search for the perfect eco-friendly house, we do not lose sight of people's desire for beauty. That means beauty, richness, variety, they should not be sacrificed. So aesthetics, the pure perception towards built environment has to go in line with the green approach so that it's acceptable, it is contextually sensitive towards that place as well as it fulfills its functions. So a soulless building will win few friends and no converts. In other words, only a few will be satisfied with it and most of the people will be unsatisfied. So environmental friendly building has to be people friendly too. This usually means being designed and built in such a way that it can respond to changing demands on its functions. Layout, technical performance means uske andar expandability ho, flexibility ho, so that it can correlate. Buildings designed to be flexible and adaptable with an obvious and accessible structure and built-in ease of maintenance are the most loved and cared for and therefore the most long lasting. According to John Ruskin, when we build, let us think that we build forever. Let it not be for present delight, not for present use alone. Let it be such work as our descendants will thank us for. That means we should design in such a way that once it is there, we can approach and we can define and can satisfy कि जी ये हमारे लिए नहीं, हमारी नेक्स्ट जनरेशन भी इसको बेहतर तौर पे यूज कर सकेगी. Though we don't know their demands, though we don't know their needs, but we need to think on these grounds. So what is a city? It's a large human settlement. Cities generally have extensive systems for housing, transportation, sanitation, utilities, land use, communications. The density facilitates interaction between people, government, organization, and businesses so that they coexist together. ताकि वो एक साथ रह सके. एक दूसरे को फैसिलिटेट कर सकें, एक दूसरे को ऑप्टिमाइजेबली फैसिलिटेशन दे सकें, एक दूसरे की नीड्स को पूरा कर सकें. So historically, city developers has been a small portion of humanity overall, but following 2 centuries of unprecedented and rapid urbanization, roughly half of the world population now lives in cities. At the moment, more than half of the population is now living in cities and urbanized centers, which has had profound consequences for global sustainability. Present day cities usually form the core of large metropolitan areas and urban areas. So, creating numerous commuters traveling towards city centers for employment, entertainment, edification, education, and a lot of other benefits जो कि उन्हें शायद रूरल एरियाज में नहीं मिल पा रहे. So from that, we come towards what is sustainable or sustainability for a city. So sustainability is a process of change in which the exploitation of resources, in other words, exploration of resources, the direction of investments, the orientation of technological development, and institutional change are all in harmony. They all go together. They all have one objective. They all have same targets. They all have same orientations. They are going in one direction and enhance both current and future potential to meet the human needs and aspirations जिसके लिए ये तमाम चीजें की जा रही हैं. So the organizing principle for sustainability is sustainable development. ये टर्म होगी जो कि आप बहुत ज्यादा अपने इस पूरे एमएससी के प्रोग्राम के अंदर हर सब्जेक्ट के अंदर मोर और लेस रिलेट करेंगे, which includes the following interconnected domains. कौन सी जी? उसमें environment आएगा, economy आएगा, and society आएगा, social aspects. Sub domains of sustainable development have been considered, जिसमें cultural, technological, political, and so many other domains are there. So sustainable development is a development that meets the need of the present, वो generation जो कि आज ये बात कर रही है, आप और मैं, without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs, क्योंकि आज हम नहीं predict कर सकते कि उनकी needs क्या होंगी. So when we talk of sustainability, economy, society, environment, these are the three circles we are talking about, indicating the relationship between the three pillars of sustainability. क्या क्या है जी? Economy, society and environmental limits, जिसके अंदर रह के हमने society और economy को curtail करना होता है, इनको grow करना होता है, इनको लेकर आगे चलना होता है, इनको भी sustainable बनाना होता है. So this is how this thing goes on in a very simple Venn diagram, जो कि हमने क्लास 8th और बिलो के अंदर पढ़ी होती हैं वेन डायग्राम्स, इसको उसके अंदर हमने बेस लाइन किया. So as you can see in this Venn diagram, there are three circles, one of society, the other of environment, and the third of economy. So when we talk the coexistence of society and environment, it has to be bearable. When we talk of society and economy, it has to be equitable, means availability of resources on an equitable ground so that they can make. And when we talk of environment and economy, it has to be viable so that the burden of economy does not destroy the environment. And when these all are three brought together, we are talking about sustainability. So this defines the core context. Around 70%, 75% of the European population live in urban or suburban areas. With the growth in the size and number of cities, the globalization of trade, the traditional link between town and country has been broken. Imported food swamps, local production, the environmental footprint of the city bears no relation to the carrying capacity of the surrounding countryside. That means each city with higher influx of population, with higher population residing inside, and with that high influx of population and higher population within the city, their needs have to be fulfilled. चाहे वो food की हो, वो shelter का हो, वो पीने के पानी का हो, वो health care का हो, वो education का हो, वो jobs का हो, कुछ भी हो, it has to be fulfilled. And for that, the countryside जो कि उसके इर्द गिर्द है, जो कि उसको sustainable बनाने के लिए और उसको provide करने के लिए थी, वो fulfill नहीं कर सकती because that is not optimizably used. The image and culture of the city refers more to the international standards than to the local ones. The ecological footprint of London, for example, is 293 times its geographical area. That means uska burden on that area has increased in multifolds. That means वो बहुत बढ़ चुका है. तो उसका जो बर्डन वहां पर है उस इकोलॉजिकल फुटप्रिंट का, वो बहुत ज्यादा है एज कंपेयर टू जितना उसका एरिया है लंदन का एज अ मेजर सिटी. According to UK government estimates, 3.8 million more homes will be needed in the next 15 years. It is important that the design of new residential developments does not stop at the building envelope, but it extends to creating secure, sheltered, and landscaped open spaces. विदाउट दीज इट विल नॉट बी फिजिबल कि उनको ग्रीन बनाया जा सके, कि आपकी अप्रोच, आपकी स्ट्रैटेजीज, आपके प्लान्स, आपके पॉलिसीज, आपके प्रोजेक्ट्स और उन प्रोजेक्ट की एक्टिविटीज, ऑल ऑफ दीज हैव टू बी यूनिडायरेक्शनल इन इंश्योरिंग दैट द projects you are doing, the designing you are doing, they all are green. They all are related with environment. So mixed residential tenure and mixed use development seem to be the best recipe or the best choice for ensuring lively livelihood, neighborhoods, and sustainable communities. In inner cities areas, however, residential populations are declining. There is a serious lack of accommodation for single people and young families, particularly the key workers on moderate incomes. We need to reverse this situation if we are to avoid city centers populated exclusively by the very poor and the very rich. वो जो गैप है वो बहुत बढ़ रहा है. क्यों? Because the families started shifting towards the other centers and the other things are happening in such a way that the single dwellers are occupying the core areas and they are not able to resolve this thing. सो वी नीड टू रिवर्स दिस सिचुएशन. और ये सिचुएशन जो है मोर और लेस अब हम अपने शहरों में भी देखते हैं कि जी जो बिल्कुल कोर एरियाज थे, जो पुराने एरियाज थे, उसमें पॉपुलेशन तो डेंस है, लेकिन ज़्यादातर वो अर्बनाइजेशन के पर्सपेक्टिव के अंदर वहाँ पे मार्केट्स इस्टेब्लिश हो रही हैं, स्टोर्स इस्टेब्लिश हो रहे हैं, वेयर हाउसेज हैं, पीपल आर मूविंग आउटवर्ड्स, दे आर गोइंग टूवर्ड्स द अदर टाउन्स विच आर इस्टेब्लिश ऑन द पेरिफेरी और सब अर्बन एरियाज की तरफ में. तो ये एक डाइवर्स किस्म की एक्शन है जो कि हर जगह पे आप ऑब्जर्व करेंगे, इट्स हैपनिंग. So, in one attempt at addressing this issue, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation (JRF) has commissioned invested in two high-density Casper developments in the Birmingham and Leeds. Casper stands for City Center Apartment for Single People at affordable rents and development costs compared reasonably favorable with social housing in the same area. In both schemes, जो कि अभी आगे चल के मैं आपके साथ डिस्कस भी करूंगा, दिखाऊंगा भी, JRF claims a return of over 6% per year on the investment while keeping basic rents at around £100 per week, जो कि वहाँ पे शायद अफोर्डेबल होगा. तो ये एक लीड्स का और दूसरा जो ये नीचे आपको नजर आ रहा है ये बर्मिंघम का था. ये दोनों आपकी जो बुक है उसके अंदर आपको एज अ केस स्टडी डिटेल्स इनकी मिल जाएंगी. दीज आर द टू इमेजेस ऑफ द टू प्रोजेक्ट्स वी आर डिस्कसिंग विद रिस्पेक्ट टू द सस्टेनेबल सिटीज. दिस सीम्स टू बी अ प्रिवेलिंग कंसेंसस backed by the government policy and public opinion that as much new development as possible should be on brownfield site. Brownfield site से मुराद वो fields हैं जी जहाँ पर previously कोई काम किया गया था, वो अब abandoned है और क्योंकि वो अब green area नहीं हो सकती, उस पर agricultural development नहीं हो सकती या उसके ऊपर आप lush green शायद development नहीं कर सकते हैं या warehouses बनाए थे या factories बनाए थे, कोई और चीज़ बनाई थी, आप उसको revitalize करें, उसको फिर से use करें. In February 1998, the government announced a national target for England that at least 60% new homes are to be built on previously developed brownfield land by 2008. 60%. So there is, however, strong argument for a more flexible approach, treating each proposal on its merits and demerits. Some environmentally sensitive developments in untouched rural locations could add to an area's diversity and prosperity, while some derelict sites in cities should be left as pockets of greenery and wildlife. So there has to be a balance. Pros and cons would exist. Merits and demerits for each proposal for each site has to be evaluated and potential benefits should be categorized so that they can be optimizably used. So with the development of sustainable site comes the question of appropriate density. पॉपुलेशन कितनी है जी पर स्क्वायर किलोमीटर या पर स्क्वायर हेक्टेयर, किस तरह से चल रही है और कैसे मैनेज हो रही है, क्योंकि जितनी ज़्यादा पॉपुलेशन होगी उतनी ज़्यादा डिमांड ऑफ वाटर भी चाहिए होगा, सिक्योरिटी भी चाहिए होगा, शेल्टर भी चाहिए होगा, फूड भी चाहिए होगा और फैसिलिटीज़ भी चाहिए होंगी और ट्रैवलिंग का भी देखना पड़ेगा. सो इंक्रीजिंग डेंसिटी बियॉन्ड अ सर्टेन थ्रेशोल्ड कैन ट्रिगर द viability of providing a public transport system and other facilities such as schools, shops, open spaces, all within the locality, so they have to be scattered. So compact developments offers the potential for greater resource efficiency and carbon dioxide reductions, for example, by achieving viability for district heating schemes at large scale. ये सोचा जा सकता है, किया जा सकता है, manageable है, case studies हैं इसकी. So care should be taken, however, that higher densities do not compromise access to daylight and sunlight, जो कि अक्सर औकात हो रहा होता है कि जी हमारे जो बहुत ही शोल्डर टू शोल्डर जो जहाँ पर हाउसिंग चल रही होती है, रूरल एरिया जो हमारे हाईली डेंस्ड एरियाज हैं उसके अंदर भी, इवन रूरल एरियाज के अंदर भी जैसी वर्टिकल ग्रोथ की तरफ जाते हैं वो हर एक के साथ वो शोल्डर टू शोल्डर जैसा तक ग्रोथ होती है कि डे लाइट, सनलाइट, क्रॉस वेंटिलेशन ये अचीव करना मुमकिन नहीं रहता. So high density of say 100 to 150 dwellings per hectare can create communities similar to the traditional street rather than the suburban state. In our context, this might change. ठीक है जी। हमारे कॉन्टेक्स्ट में शायद ये इससे भी ज्यादा हो। द काउंसिल फॉर द प्रोटेक्शन ऑफ रूरल इंग्लैंड सीपीआरए इज लॉबिंग टू प्रिवेंट स्प्रॉल। स्प्रॉल मींस एक स्पाइन के गिर सिर्फ थोड़ी थोड़ी डेवलपमेंट हो और उसके बाद बस उसके साथ साथ चलती जा रही हो, लेकिन डीप ना जा रही हो। इन न्यू डेवलपमेंट्स एंड रीसेंट रिविजन्स टू प्लानिंग पॉलिसी PPG3 recommends minimum densities of 30 to 50 dwellings per hectare. According to one author, high density mixed use neighborhoods give back the sense of place that 20th century planning policies have undermined. So current standards for the space, specifically in our context, ये चीज थोड़ी बहुत variate करेगी. Since the book was written with the context of London and England or UK, so in our context, this might not be straight away, right away applicable, and we need to think on green grounds with respect to our context. हम में से जो मुल्तान में है, हम में से जो इस्लामाबाद में है, हम में से जो लाहौर में है, जो कराची में है, जो कोयटा के अंदर है, जो गवादर के अंदर है, जो और मेजर सिटीज के अंदर है, फैसलाबाद के अंदर है, रावलपिंडी के अंदर है, जो पिशावर के अंदर है, ठीक है जी, जो सवात के अंदर हैं, और जो गिलगित बल्तिस्तान के अंदर, दे हैव टू थिंक ऑन देयर ओन कॉन्टेक्स्ट एंड ऑन देयर ओन ग्राउंड्स, एंड ऑब्वियसली वन solution will not be applicable to everybody. So current stand space for the need for new houses are determined more than anything by the perceived need for high levels of car parking. That's another issue, transportation based. So any sustainable development. So with respect to this thing, we need to understand that ये variations exist करेंगे. So we have to make these things happen. So any sustainable development must examine and implement ways of minimizing reliance on the motor vehicles. One of the best ways of doing is to provide a reliable public transport system, which will require a certain density of habitation to be viable. So that will make the carbon footprint reduced in this way. हमारे पास एक जो बेहतर है वो पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्टेशन का यूटिलाइजेशन है जो कि ऑप्टिमाइज्ड यूज हो रही हो. Alternatively, some eco developments have undertaken to reduce reliance on cars as part of their initial brief, but that has to be strategized. So this is the Bedsit project, as previously discussed in South London, has a density of over 100 units per hectare while maintaining good solar access. As you can see, the green transport plans to reduce the level of car use by providing facilities for working at home, prioritizing pedestrians and cyclists on the site, and making available cleaner, cheaper community-based alternatives. Okay, ji. So, Bennington Zero Energy Development, the BEDZ, is an environmentally friendly housing development in Hackbridge, London, England. It is the London borough of Sweden, 2 miles northeast of the town of Sweden itself, designed to create zero carbon emission. It was the first large-scale community to do so. BEDZ was designed by the architect Bill Dunster to be carbon neutral, protecting the environment, supporting a more sustainable lifestyle. The 82 homes and 14.5 square meters of workspace were built in 2000 to 2002. The project was shortlisted for the Sterling Prize in 2003. Some of the major principles: zero energy. The project is designed to use only energy from renewable resources generated on site. There are 777 square meters, 8,360 square feet of solar panels. Previous fuels, the development's cogeneration plant, downdraft gasifier to provide district heating and electricity. The gasifier is not being used because of technical implementation problems, though the technology has been and is being used successfully at other similar sites. High quality, the apartments are finished to a high standard to attract the urban professionals. Energy efficient, the houses face south to take advantage of solar gain, are triple glazed and have high thermal insulation. हमारे केस में हमारे मोस्ट ऑफ द सिटीज़ जो कि जैसा से कराची है, मुल्तान है, लाहौर है, रावलपिंडी है, फैसलाबाद है, इनके अंदर शायद ये वाली चीज़ हमें ऑपोजिट डायरेक्शन के पर्सपेक्टिव में करनी पड़ेगी, जहाँ पे हमारे पास एम्बियंट लाइट ज़रूर मौजूद हो, लेकिन वी कैन अवॉइड द डायरेक्ट सोलर गेन. Water efficient. Most rainwater falling on the site is collected and reused. Appliances choosing to be water efficient and use recycled water where possible. Our living machine system of recycling wastewater was installed but is not operating. That means pros and cons exist. That means बहुत सारे systems हैं जो कि use में आ रहे हैं, बहुत सारे ऐसे भी हैं जो कि use में नहीं आए. Low impact materials. Many of these were selected from renewable or recycled sources within 50 miles, 80 kilometers of the site to minimize the energy required for transportation. Waste recycling. Refuse collection facilitations are designed to support recycling. Transportation network works in partnership with the UK's leading car sharing operator, City Car Club. Residents are encouraged to use the environmentally friendly alternative to car ownership, and on-site selection of vehicles are available for use. Encourage eco-friendly transport, electric and liquefied petroleum gas LPG gas have priority over cars that burn petrol and diesel, and electricity is provided in parking spaces for charging electric cars. A higher reported quality of life with a strong sense of community has been established. So, what is a countryside? Moving towards the next one. Countryside is land not in towns, cities, or industrial areas that is either used for farming or left in its natural condition. So, when we talk of a sustainable countryside, a recent housing development in the countryside has taken the form of suburban sprawl on greenfield sites around the towns and villages or dormitory suburbs serving cities. There has been a drift of population away from cities. Around 20% now live in rural areas compared with 10% in the 1980s. This is like जो हमारे पास अब थोड़ी सी मूवमेंट नजर आती है जी, फॉर्म हाउसेस का इस्टेब्लिश होना, सब अर्बन एरियाज के अंदर छोटे छोटे टाउन्स का इस्टेब्लिश होना, लोग जगह एक्वायर करते हैं और उसके बाद से दैट इज द सेम फिनोमिना. So this sort of development has a high impact. इसका impact बहुत strong आ रहा था. It generates lots of traffic, covers more countryside and more roads. Is not built of local materials, has been built to the minimum standards of energy conservation and is obtrusive. Negative impact आ रहा है उसका environment के ऊपर large scale. The countryside itself is now thought of by many as a cross between a food factory and a heritage museum. समझ रहे हैं जी? A food factory and a heritage museum, somewhere in between these two, dedicated to preserving misguided agriculture policies and practices. There seems little room for people to live and work in a way that develops the land sustainably. Britain has had a glorious history of building progressive housing developments. Robertson's New Lanark, the philanthropic industrialist Port Sunlight, New Archwick and Bonville, and the Garden City movement. The Kurdish smallholder settlements, the Ethiopian Whiteway colony, these are some of the examples. We have a surfeit of examples of better ways to build. Even the Prince of Wales village of Thornbury often seen as passage is based on good planning principle and uses local references and materials. Simon Fairley, in his book Low Impact Development, argues that by giving people the opportunity to live in the countryside in return for ecological improvements and a commitment towards sustainability, the planning system could reinvigorate the land based economy and create a more diverse and rural environment and facilitate the provision of affordable housing. So, that is how it has to be managed. Low impact development, ताकि उसका impact कम से कम आ रहा हो. There are efforts presently being made to have low impact or sustainable developments incorporated as a distinct category of development within local planning policies in the countryside. This distinction has already been made by West Lothian District Council near Edinburgh in their lowland crofting or very low density housing and woodland development schemes. So things are happening as you can see over here. Scattered formation है, रोड एक्सेस है, लेकिन ऑप्टिमाइजेबली उन्होंने ग्रीन लैंड को ग्रीन ही रखा है और ब्राउन फील्ड्स को ऑप्टिमाइजेबली यूज करने की कोशिश की है. Alright, moving towards the next topic, that is the location or the site, which is very important while we are discussing towards enabling things to happen. Alright, so when we talk about the location and the site, we need to understand how the things are happening and what are the core context and how these things have to be managed with respect to the context in which the things are existing and how they are relating with the climate. ठीक है जी? So when we are talking about these southern and Mediterranean seas and European coastal sites, this is the example which has been given in your book. So as you can see over here, this is France. If over here we have Poland, the UK is on the upper side, Spain is in the and we can see the Algeria and Morocco on the lower side, the southern side, and on the eastern side we can see the Turkey and Romania. So when we take of these things, this is the rainfall data, 100 to 300 millimeters. So within a small context area, as you can see, there is a lot of variation, right? From this like 100 to 300 millimeter of rain leading to around 3000 plus millimeter of rain per day. So within a small context, within a small location, within a small area, these variations does exist. So even across the land mass the size of Britain, the climate changes significantly. Within 80 kilometers of west coast, the average annual rainfall ranges from 800 millimeters to 2000 millimeters. The average winter temperature varies by 2 degrees. The number of sunny days increases as we move inland, although the solar energy remains the same. West Wales benefits from clean Atlantic air. So snow falls on 5 days per year in southwest England, 15 in the southeast, and 35 days per year in the northern Scotland. So it gets colder and less sunny the further north you are in Britain. It is 50% colder in the Shetland than in Cornwall, and about 25% duller means low sun exposure. However, the latitude effect can be qualified by the presence of warm Gulf Stream winds and the amount of pollution in the air as well. So there are four key factors in assessing the effects of climate on a particular location. Number one is the solar energy, measured in kilowatt hours per square meter of horizontal surface per day or month or a year. The common sense tells us it is sunnier in the southern than in the north, but our weather is dominated by the seas that surround us. So the prevailing winds and regional pollution, all of which produce odd patterns of sunny or overcast conditions. हमारे कॉन्टेक्स्ट के परस्पेक्टिव में अगर आप देखेंगे तो फॉग और स्मॉग का एक फिनोमिना है जो कि पंजाब और केपी के अंदर अब ऑब्जर्व हो रहा है जी. दैट कैन बी रिलेटेड कि जी सोलर एनर्जी डज एग्जिस्ट, लेकिन एक्सपोज सरफेस उसके हिसाब से ऑप्टिमाइज नहीं हो सकती. द सेकंड वन इज प्रेसिपिटेशन. रेन is measured in millimeters per day or month or year, and it is useful to know the average, maximum and minimum readings. Rain distribution is determined by prevailing winds and the height of the site above sea level. The frequency of precipitation varies quite dramatically from 600 to 1200 hours per year. If you do not like rain, then Cambridge and the Fens is the place to live, which is around 500 millimeter. If you do, then you will enjoy the top of Snowdown, which is around 4000 millimeters, as can be seen in figure 3.4 in your book. The next third factor is basically the wind speed. This is measured in meters per second at 10 meters above the ground. It is also useful to know the wind direction. Altitude, ground roughness, local variables will affect wind speeds, but generally the coasts are windier because they have unobstructed area than the hinterland, and west winds are stronger but warmer than the north and east winds. The next factor which will be there is basically temperature. Measured in degrees centigrades or Kelvins or Fahrenheit, average maximum and minimum figures are very useful, as well as the diurnal range over 24 hours. There's another figure 3.5 shows the two variables of latitude and prevailing winds, additional costs. So extreme weather events, that is floods, earthquakes, hurricanes, are becoming increasingly common. And Pakistan, being one of the most sensitive country as well as vulnerable to the climate change, is facing these all the time. So information concerning their severity and possible future trends should help to avoid or protect a vulnerable site or the people living on that site. Then the UK flood warning information is available from the Environmental Agency. In our case, it will be ParkMet. So what is climate? The next topic is the statistics of weather over long periods of time. It is measured by assessing the patterns of variation in temperature, humidity, atmospheric pressures, wind, precipitation, atmospheric particle count, and other meteorological variables in a given region over long periods of time. When we talk of weather, climate differs from weather in that the weather only describes the short-term conditions of these variables in a given range. The short-term can be like 5 days, 4 days, 10 days, 12 days, 14 days, but not over like years and months. So region's climate is generated by the climate system, which has 5 major components. कौन-कौन से जी? These include atmosphere, hydrosphere, cryosphere, lithosphere, and biosphere. When we talk of microclimate, the neighborhood, the topographic factors give rise to local variations in climate. Microclimate means वो climate जो कि immediate context के अंदर आपके आ रहा है. Estuaries, funnel winds, and sea fog island, mountain block winds from one direction to another, inversion pockets of cold air form in steep valleys, north slopes, winter sun, etc. These are the microclimate. आपके इमीडिएट साइट के साथ में क्या चीज बिल्डअप हुई हुई है, ग्रीनलैंड है, नहीं है, कोई लेक है साथ में, वाटर बॉडी है साथ के अंदर, या मेजर एक अर्बन सेंटर है जिसके साथ में आप लोकेटेड है. सो दीज define the microclimate as well as the neighborhood. The microclimate around the house is also affected by prevailing vegetation and tree cover, bumps and dips in the grounds, in water courses, as well as any existing structures, man-made or natural. So these features can be used to give maximum solar access or shading and wind protection as appropriate to obtain the best low energy bioclimatic design or configuration. Shelter from wind, that is another factor which we need to consider. Concerns over wind are mostly involved with its chilling effects. In our case, the northern areas have to see towards these things, G. But in the southern sides, in the middle lands, as well as in the other areas where the chilling effect is comparatively less, cross ventilation is preferred in Pakistan. विंटर विंड्स कैन डू द फॉलोइंग इंक्रीज इनफिल्ट्रेशन एंड हीट लॉस बढ़ जाएगा जी इन्फिल्ट्रेशन जब भी होगी मींस के वो कॉम्पैक्ट ना रहे कूल द आउटर सरफेस ऑफ द हाउस स्पेशली व्हेन वेट with rain thereby increasing heat transfer from inside to the outside create uncomfortable windswept spaces around the houses force driving rain and wind blown snow into the house into parts of its construction cause structural damage to the property just like this जिस तरह से कि इस तस्वीर में wind shelter from other buildings have to be there tree planting fencing earthworks building underground orientation has to be seen किस mechanism के ऊपर है solar exposure के perspective में and an outer surface that has pockets of still air so that वो turbulence जो cause हो रहा है उसको reduce किया जा सके so when we talk of microclimate एज यू कैन सी द विंड डायरेक्ट इंटेक जोन सा है वहाँ पे प्रेशर कुछ और है और जो बाकी दूसरी तरफ है उस तरफ नेगेटिव प्रेशर बन रहा है as you can see we are having different forms of effects of tall building on the wind direction as well as fortunately presenting a narrow end to the prevailing wind also presents one of the large faces to the south for passive solar gain तो इस तरीके से we can optimize the cross ventilation अगर इसके internal planning उस perspective में की गई है wind infiltration into a house is usually a flow from high to low pressure areas जिस तरह से कि यहाँ पर आपको ये नजर आ रहा है इस तरफ से high pressure से low pressure की तरफ to reduce routes through the house is helpful if the path is broken by planning the house so that no room runs right through from front to back मतलब कंटिन्यूस ना हो ब्रेक आ रही हो बीच में बैरियर्स बन रहे हो ताकि उसकी स्ट्रेंथ और उसका इम्पैक्ट दोनों को रिड्यूस किया जा सके जो विंड की मूवमेंट है हाउस शुड बी ओरिएंटेड टू प्रेजेंट द नैरो एंड टू द प्रिवेलिंग विंड in our case specifically in the plain regions in the hotter regions in uh, regions where we need cross ventilation at a higher rate this should be reversed maximum side should be exposed to the cross direction so a group of houses should be placed approximately 6 house heights apart in our case this might not be feasible because the land is very expensive and we are short of land so in that case it has to be comparatively planned in such a way कि cross ventilation भी achieve हो सके और बाकी चीजें भी manage हो सके design should avoid forms that accelerate the wind or form वेंचुरी दैट मीन्स टनल्स या फ्यूनल्स वाला इफेक्ट जो है उसको रिड्यूस किया जा सके हमारे यहाँ इस मैकेनिज्म को वेंचुरी इफेक्ट को यूज करते हैं क्रॉस वेंटिलेशन के लिए कि एक तरफ से जो मूवमेंट है उसको फैसिलिटेट किया जाए ताकि दूसरी तरफ वो फोर्स वेंटिलेशन की जरूरत ना पड़े शेल्टर बेड्स ऑफ ट्रीज आर वेरी इफेक्टिव स्पेसिफिकली जहाँ पर कि हमने इसको बैरियर के तौर पे यूज करना हो नॉइज पोल्यूशन के अंदर भी वो एक अच्छा इफेक्ट दे रही होती है जी रिड्यूस कर देती है and on the contrary apart from that privacy के perspective में भी it's a very good filter as the foliage is porous to varying degrees there is less shading behind them than there would be with a solid wall. A more general wind slowing takes place. Ideally, the trees should be the same height as the house and 1 to 3 house height distant होना चाहिए थी 1 से 3 height पे ताकि अगर वो खुदा खास्ता if it falls it doesn't damages the boundary as well as the periphery. It has been found that such an arrangement can reduce air filtration by around 40%. Solid fence of about 20% height of house spaced one house height to windward is also useful. वो भी reduce कर रही है जी infiltration by maybe 30%. Fence and trees combine करेंगे तो 60% effect आ रहा है. Courtyard shaped houses, groups of L-shaped houses or a walled garden are forms that will provide sheltered external spaces. Obviously वो break करेंगे, barrier provide कर रहे होंगे. और जो सेंट्रल एरिया है वो जो कोर्टयार्ड का बन रहा है दैट विल बी शाइनी इट विल बी वेलकमिंग फॉर द इंटरनल इनहेबिटेंट्स और वो उसके अंदर आके रह सकते हैं यूटिलाइज कर सकते हैं डे टाइम के ऊपर जैसा हमारे यहाँ पे जो कोर्टयार्ड्स बने होते थे जो वेरांडास बने होते थे हम उनको ऑप्टिमाइजेबली यूज करें इन द सेम वे The ancient techniques of jetted floors and wide eaves help protect the lower walls from the effects of driving rain that can be utilized as well. In our case, we optimizably prefer and use rainwater not only for the irrigation but for the rainwater harvesting to optimizably use it for alternate purposes. The house surface should be as rough as possible. This is easily done by planting wall climbing plants. और उसके थ्रू ट्रायलिसिस के थ्रू भी किया जा सकता है जी दिस इज हाउ इट हैज बीन डन and this can reduce the direct impact of the airflow and can provide infiltration, reducing the infiltration ताकि वो barrier बने और direct impact ना दे रहा हो. एक्सटर्नल नॉइज सोर्सेज को भी रिड्यूस करने के अंदर हेल्प आउट होता है जी, सो दैट इफ वी हैव लाइक 85 decibels of noise on one level and after that reaching back over here till it will be reduced because of the trees addition. Visual screening हो रही है जी, generating noise it will be reduced, planning the house to avoid windows of quiet areas facing noise sources and using running water to disguise background noise in the garden, so these can be reduced. This is the electromagnetic field strength from overhead electric distribution. जितनी ज़्यादा बढ़ती जाएगी उतना ही वो डिस्टर्बेंस क्रिएट कर रहा होता है, एंड इन द लॉन्ग रन ये पावर लाइंस जो कि हमारे घरों के ऊपर से गुजर रही होती हैं हैज़ अ स्ट्रॉन्ग इलेक्ट्रोमैग्नेटिक फील्ड इफेक्ट, जिसका इम्पैक्ट लॉन्ग टर्म के ऊपर हमारे बॉडी ऑर्गन्स के ऊपर, हमारी ऑडिबिलिटी की रेंज के ऊपर, हमारी फिजिकल स्ट्रेंथ के ऊपर और हमारे न्यूरोलॉजिकल सिस्टम्स के ऊपर आ रहा होता है, जो कि एक नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट होता है. सो वी नीड टू अवॉइड दैट थिंग. There is considerable disquiet over the unusual electromagnetic environments. Disturbance in the Earth's magnetic field. These are caused by the faults in the ground, electromagnetic field and electrical field levels from overhead and underground electrical supplies. इनकी वजह से बाजू का जो appliances घर में होती हैं उन पे भी impact आता है. Radio frequency fields हैं. This is the third one, जिसकी वजह से लेकिन इनका comparatively कम impact होता है. Features of a sustainable low impact development. Some of the major features that we'll be discussing are listed over here. Whether building from scratch or buying an existing house, the first step is to narrow your options to a handful of potential and suitable locations. So identification of site is one important. Local context, design the house to respect but not mimic local forms and to be honestly build of mainly local materials. So these are some of the basic key factors, key elements, key uh, um, what you can say principles which we are exploring. Community involvement, जितना लोग ज़्यादा बेहतर होगा, लोकल होगा, उनको जब आप इंगेज करते हैं वो बेहतर तौर पे गाइड कर सकते हैं लोकल मटेरियल्स के ऊपर, लोकल टेक्नोलॉजीज के ऊपर. सो इट हेल्प्स. Spaces around the house, use pattern language or arranging human habitation to plan your house and garden. Soil structure, organic horticulture and techniques such as green manures and composting will be used. Biodiversity can be managed. Trees should be planted. Green roofs have to be there. तो आपका जो कार्बन फुटप्रिंट है इसकी वजह से वो रिड्यूस हो जाएगा. लो एनर्जी हैज़ टू बी प्लांटेड इन सच अ वे कि वो प्लानिंग का कंपोनेंट हो जाए. रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी रिसोर्सेज घरों के केस के अंदर तो सोलर के अलावा भी कोई मेजर ऑप्शन इसके अलावा नहीं है. फोटोवोल्टेक्स आ रहे हैं हमारे पास जी, दैट कैन बी यूज इन द लार्जर स्केल. और ओपन स्पेसेस या फार्म हाउसेस के अंदर गालबन विंड को भी हम लोग यूज़ कर सकते हैं. वाटर सप्लाई हैज़ टू बी मैच्ड इन सच अ वे कि रेन वाटर हार्वेस्टिंग शुड बी डन. सीवेज ट्रीटमेंट हैज़ टू बी इंश्योर्ड सो दैट कि हमारे पास जो सीवेज के ट्रीटमेंट के बाद जो स्लज जिस टाइम के ऊपर मैनेज हो रहा हुआ है तो उसको अगर कहीं पर एग्रीकल्चर में या किसी और जगह के ऊपर यूटिलाइज किया जा सके फॉर द प्रोडक्शन of any product or utilizable material for agricultural production can be utilized. Growing food जिसको हम kitchen gardening कह रहे हैं जी, that is one of the good principles which can be utilized. Recycling and reuse, मतलब हम प्लास्टिक्स की जगह अगर फर्स्ट करें जो अप्लायंस जो हमारे यूटेंसिल्स हैं वो किसी बेहतर क्वालिटी के स्टेनलेस स्टील के यूज़ कर रहे हैं, ब्रास के यूज़ कर रहे हैं, किसी और के यूज़ कर रहे हैं, दैट कैन बी मोर reusable as well as can be recycled easily rather than utilizing plastics and other waste materials. Working from home is one option. Specifically in the time of COVID-19 we have seen this thing working, and we have come across that this thing can be one of the best choices while ensuring your safety, security, as well as managing your health as well as the work. Planning for low energy house, the solar aspect has to be seen कि आपका जो प्राइमरी कॉन्टेक्स्ट है, जो लोकल क्लाइमेट है, जो कॉन्टेक्स्ट है उसके परस्पेक्टिव में यू हैव टू सी कि जी टेम्परेचर वेरिएशंस कैसी हैं, कितना सरफेस एरिया आपका एक्सपोज हो रहा है, कैसे शेडिंग डिवाइसेस उसमें ऐड करनी है, कहाँ पर ग्लास को ऐड करना है, कहाँ पे ग्लेजिंग आपने रखनी है, कहाँ पे ग्लेजिंग को अवॉइड करना है, कहाँ पे आपने वॉल्स के अंदर फेनिस्ट्रेशन इस तरीके से क्रिएट करनी है या ओपनिंग्स इस तरीके से क्रिएट करनी है या उसके फीचर्स को और उसके मटेरियल्स की सिलेक्शन ऐसे करनी है कि सोलर हीट गेन बहुत ज़्यादा ना हो अगर आप एक ऐसे इन्वायरमेंट में जहाँ पे क्लाइमेट गर्म है, एंड इफ इट इज़ ऑन another climate where the things are manageable and it's a cold climate, then how can you optimizably use the solar? So solar has to be used in such a way कि आपकी heating load should not increase, but on the contrary side optimize solar lighting should be done to use the best ambient level of lighting which is available should be utilized. Shelter from wind is necessary where it has to be done, growing biofuels where applicable, where we can, and where we can utilize these kind of things, specifically in the areas where the agriculture is extensively utilized or can be optimized. We should opt for it. Shelter from wind is a necessity जहाँ पर कि हमने infiltration को रोकना है, barrier create करने हैं, we have to see for it. So, in a conclusion of this lecture, I'd like to conclude that we need to strategize the design from sustainable perspective, and strategies are made right in the start of a project, not on the later stages. So it needs to be done in that way. Design should be holistic, means a wider approach, a bigger perspective. A wider perspective have to be incorporated with multiple aspects associated like environment, people, economy, society, local materials, local context. These have to be end user participation, community engagement to be promoted. Without that, you cannot ensure that the building is sustainable and the end users are satisfied with it and they are happy with it. Low energy and energy conservation approaches with focus on optimization of green and open spaces. This is very much related with most of the context within Pakistan, and it will be highly appreciable if that can be incorporated. And study of microclimate, जिस तरह से कि हम लोग साइट एनालिसिस कर रहे होते हैं इन आर्किटेक्चर और इन सिविल इंजीनियरिंग, दैट हैज टू बी डिजाइन, इट हैज टू बी मेड लाइक अ पार्ट ऑफ द स्ट्रेटजी to study of microclimate to enhance the design development and adaptation. The Whole House book by Cindy Harris and Pat Border, that is your main reference book for this subject. That will be shared with you guys, inshallah. And this is the end of our first lecture. I'll welcome any questions and comments from your side during our session at the portal while we'll be discussing that. And I would request you all to go through the lecture before go through the lecture, which will be available on the portal, and the video which I'll be sharing, so that you have a clear understanding of the whole text. And then we can opt for a more utilizable time during our session where we can have more question and answer kind of thing rather than going through the slides over there. We can go through them as well wherever it is needed. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Have a good day. Enjoy your time, G. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.